Episode number 190. You are listening to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out, and I am your host, Lori Jill Isenstadt, IBCLC. I am taking a few weeks break, but I'm so glad that you're going to be spending today with me, listening to today's show. While I'm on break, I have a few reminders about what's happening inside the All About Breastfeeding world. I host a free Facebook group that I would love for you to join, come and participate, hang out, and connect with other breastfeeding moms. This is a place where you and other moms can learn more about breastfeeding, not only from myself, but from other group members. I'm really proud to say that this group, the members, they're really a bunch of lovely women who are kind and they're generous. Our members are quick to respond to questions, and they're quick to jump in and lend some emotional support if that's what you need. I'm pretty much in the group every day to ensure that all the information shared is accurate, and also to chime in and answer a question when it may need more of a professional response. I would love for you to join our free Facebook group by searching for the 4 words, All About Breastfeeding Community. You want to make sure you put the word community in there, otherwise it brings you to the wrong group. You can also find out more about 2 other groups that are starting in August with All About Breastfeeding. I have the Lactation Student Mastermind Group, which is a group that is here to help and support lactation students who can benefit from having peer and professional support during the time they're learning to become an IBCLC. I find that when I was a student, I was kind of going at it alone as far as peers were concerned. And I speak to many students now who say the same thing. They're all wishing that they had a group of other students to be able to talk to about what they're doing as a student. I also have the IBCLC Mastermind Group. This is really fabulous. It is the first group of its kind. And really what we're doing is helping and supporting IBCLCs. You're either in a private practice and or you want to build a private practice. There's lots more details about both these groups. If I've piqued your interest, if you want more details, just go to www.allaboutmothering.com and click on the link that says Student Mastermind. I'm really excited for these groups to start in August.
It was all based on our connection, like an attachment bonding. I think for some reason, I was the only person who could breastfeed him. And so that for some reason very quickly became in my mind, the primary way that our relationship, would build and grow. So losing that breastfeeding relationship to me kind of meant losing some attachment to him, I think.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
I love podcasting and being a host of this show. One of the really cool benefits is to meet and interview people I have admired from afar. Abby is one of those ladies that I have been following. She first came to my attention when a picture of her nursing in public went viral. While I'm not a fan of the mommy wars, I did love that the picture made the rounds and it had people talking. She has a really cool blog called The Badass Breastfeeder, which is a blog that advocates for the breastfeeding family and attachment parenting. Feel free to check out her blog and you can get a free ebook on breastfeeding a toddler. All her info will be in the show notes. All you need to do is go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/podcast and her info will be posted in the show notes. If you enjoy this show and what Abby stands for, go on her blog and leave her some comments about how much you enjoyed this show. Abby has a master's degree in social work and worked with abused and neglected teenagers for 14 years before her first son, Jack, was born in 2011. After struggling to get started with breastfeeding, she quit her job and refocused her passion for advocacy to breastfeeding and gentle parenting. Abby hopes to empower mothers through blogging and public speaking to breastfeed, breastfeed in public, and practice gentle parenting. She lives in Chicago with her husband and 2 sons. Abby's blog can be found at www.thebadassbreastfeeder.com and on Facebook /The Badass Breastfeeder, and we'll have that in the show notes afterwards. I would love to welcome you to the show, Abby.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad we have this opportunity to hang out together and that my All About Breastfeeding listeners will get to know you perhaps on a little bit different level than reading your blog. So thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
I'd love to have you share a little bit of background about what life was like for you and the family that you grew up in.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Wisconsin to a mom and a dad. And when I was 11 years old, I had a little sister born. I don't want to say it was uneventful because no one's life is uneventful, but it was your pretty typical American upbringing. I went to public school. I had swimming classes. We were kind of middle class. I don't think there was any particular philosophy. There wasn't like, my parents weren't reading parenting books, following some sort of philosophy and, a part of some, bigger parenting group or anything. It was just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, I think. When I was 15 years old, we actually moved to Amsterdam because of my father's job. And then I lived there until I was an adult. Then I was removed from American culture. I speak against, spanking and these kinds of things. And I wasn't spanked as a child. I don't have that in my family. I know a lot of people do. And that obviously makes it even harder to deal with. I think back of it on my childhood fondly.
Do you have any idea, did moving to Amsterdam, did that begin to shape any thoughts you had about parenting that might have been different had you not moved?
I never had my head in parenting until I became a parent. And then when I started to think about parenting, I had a completely different philosophy on it than I actually did when they handed me my baby. But I think that in general, moving to Europe kind of made my family a little bit more relaxed. It's a little mellower in Europe. It's just people are a little bit more relaxed. The kids are kind of running around and, there's not as much fear, I think, around parenting in Europe.
Would you say a little bit more family-centered and a lot less looking for books to tell us how to parent?
Yeah, I would say that. And there's it's so much more of like a village setting there. There's more villages type settings than there are. I mean, we don't have any of that here. Maybe in, smaller towns or something, but there's so many small towns and even in the big cities are kind of small town-ish where there's just a lot of community, which is something so lacking, in my opinion, in American parenting.
When you got your degree in social work and you work with abused and neglected teenagers, which I think, my goodness, that's a hard job.
Yeah.
But when you were doing that, when you thought about becoming a parent, were you planning on staying home with your first child, or when you gave birth to Jack, was that a game changer for you?
No, that was a total game changer. So when I got pregnant, I was like, I'll be home for 3 months and then I'm going to go back to work. I was, a workaholic up until that point. I was at work long hours. I just worked. And as you say, it was an extremely stressful job. These teenagers, this is a residential facility that I worked in, and I was there for many years. And I was everything from a case planner to a therapist to a supervisor as I was getting my master's degree. It's very, very high stress. I mean, I was in physical restraints with these children on a daily basis. They struggle with mental illness and violent behavior and everything, high stress. So I said, well, I'm going to be, this is what I do. This is my identity as the social worker. And, we even talked about my husband staying home, being a stay-at-home dad. And when I had Jack and I went on maternity leave, and then I was also like, I'm going to run my house like a residential facility. There's going to be rules and this and that. There's going to be, I'm so prepared for parenting because I've been dealing with these kids for so long. And, so they handed me Jack, who was a newborn baby. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm totally prepared to deal with a violent 16-year-old, but I don't know what to do with this newborn baby.
You forgot that's not what you were going to get.
Yeah, well, I had no idea what I was going to get. I thought I was just going to like suddenly be in parenthood and then it's all equal and the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 35 years old when I had him. So had been long living as an adult with opinions and, and I'm extremely opinionated. So I was really stuck in this thought process. And so when they handed him to me, I was just, I crumbled. Then I started to struggle with breastfeeding, and it was like that moment I went on maternity leave, I realized how stressful that job had been. I knew, but it was really like, wow, that's not something that I should really be bringing home to my children. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to have to think about whether I'm even going to go back. And the more I struggled with breastfeeding, the more I just wasn't really thinking about that anymore. I was just thinking about how am I going to get through each day. It was so stressful and so scary. And I don't know why I wanted to breastfeed so bad. And I don't know why I pushed for it so hard. But there's just this something that came out in me that I just fought for it so hard. And not to say that moms that don't succeed aren't fighting hard, but they just have, we all have different circumstances. But I just fought tooth and nail all the time. I was awake for like 3 months doing this research and calling La Leche League leaders and like trying to just figure it out. We got kind of into this really great place. And I'm like, I'm so not in any mindset to go back and do therapy with these kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just decided, I said, I'm going to stay home with him, and this is what I'm going to do. And
did that shock family members and your husband?
I think, yeah, I think it did. I don't know about shock. I think it was everyone.
Because sometimes some people see us in this role, and like you said that you were a workaholic. Yes. It's what you did. It was your identity, and you probably never talked during your pregnancy about staying home for any long term.
No.
And then it's like all of a sudden, because I was like that, and then we have this baby, and it's like, who's going back to work?
Yeah.
Nobody's going to watch my baby.
Right.
And then other people are looking at you thinking, oh, you never even talked about that possibility before. So I guess I didn't mean like, utter shock, like a major trauma, but something that was unexpected.
I think
that
so,
they
but
would
I
have
think
thought
also,
you did.
Yeah, but I think people also knew how stressed out I was at that job. And it was almost like, okay, this is going to be her way out of that. I'd been kind of looking for ways out of that for years, actually. I think just being kind of afraid of change. And so I think it turned out to just be like, okay, so this is our avenue away from that type of work.
Okay, so I want to talk more deeply about your breastfeeding experience. And the first thing I want to do is I'd like for both of us to just take a few deep breaths into the nose, out through the mouth, and prepare us for talking about some of the emotional stuff. Are you ready to do that?
Okay, yes.
All right, so let's take a deep breath into the nose together and slowly let the air out, and just relax your facial muscles, your jaw, your tongue. Take another deep breath in through the nose and slowly let the air out through pursed lips, and just drop your shoulders and your arms. And just one more deep in breath in through the nose and out. Have you ever asked your mother, were you breastfed?
Yes, and not until I had started breastfeeding. But yes, I was breastfed for 3 months.
Cool.
And then I believe she was encouraged by her doctor to transition me to a bottle. I don't know why.
Yeah, it was probably a very common thing because the different parts of the country at different eras, women were encouraged to either take a pill and dry up, breastfeed their baby for the first 6 days, breastfeed for 2 weeks, for 2 months, at 3 weeks or at 3 months, start giving cereal, transition to the bottle.
Right.
There were things went in it.
This still happens. Yeah. I was encouraged to give my baby formula from the first day.
All right, so tell us about that. I'd love to hear about your breastfeeding experience with Jack.
So I I had a very healthy pregnancy with Jack, and I went to 41 weeks, which is, 1 week past the magical due date. And
taboo.
I had no idea about any of this. I just knew that I didn't know about like due dates weren't reliable, and I didn't know any of this. I knew nothing about anything. I read like what to expect when you're expecting and all of these like mainstream books. And of course, I don't talk about any of this stuff. So I'm at 41 weeks and I go to the doctor and I'm like miserable because I'm like, get this baby out of me. And they're like, okay, we're gonna, you're 1 week overdue, and so we're gonna induce you. And so I was induced, and it didn't work. So 12 hours later, I was induced again. And by this time, it was just nothing but pain, but I wasn't dilating. I wasn't, facing. There was nothing. He was just in there.
Do you remember what method they used for induction?
Cervidil.
Okay. When you're new to all this, when they say, okay, we're going to induce you, in our pretty little heads, we're like, okay, they're going to induce me, get labor going, and I'm going to have a baby in 12 hours, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's not at all what happened. So after 12 hours, it was like my body contracting because this drug was telling it to, but there was no, Jack was like, I'm not ready to come out. So then they did it again, and now I'm just even more pain. So it was just a huge, long process to getting him out because he was not anywhere near ready to come out. So after like 35 hours, whatever, he was finally born. And they were like, they had to call like the head of the department to come in because they're like, we can't get this baby out. And his head was like huge. His head was just like sitting there and he wouldn't come out. So they came in, they gave me an episiotomy, which was terrible. He finally came out and, okay, so I have a baby. And I'm brought to the recovery room, and then he's a baby. So he's like crying every once in a while, and I'm holding him, and I'm trying to breastfeed. And this is the very first time I've ever seen anybody breastfeed. Me looking down, trying to breastfeed my baby is the first time I'd ever seen anybody breastfeed, ever.
So that's at this point in your mothering life, that's a biggie, that we're missing generations of women being able to.
I had no idea then. I was like, well,
right.
He's just going to breastfeed, and that's because that's what babies do. And I knew enough to, they kept putting a pacifier in his mouth, and I would take it out and put him to my breast. So they came in at one point and they were like, yeah, so you're not making enough milk. And that's why he's so fussy, is because he's hungry. He's like not even a day old yet. And I'm like, oh, and they're like, so I think you should give him a little bit of formula. And I was like, no, I'm not giving him any formula. No. Came in a few hours later with, more doctors to tell me how serious of a situation it is, that I'm not getting enough milk and he's starving now. And so naturally I gave him formula because I don't want my baby to starve. And I didn't know that he wasn't starving. I didn't know enough to know that he was perfectly fine. So I gave him a little bit of formula, and then I came home with my goodie bag of tons and tons of formula, and we were so happy. We thought we'd made out like bandits because we had all this free stuff. We were put on the schedule. Every 2 hours, we're going to breastfeed for 20 minutes on each breast, and then we give him a bottle. And we did this, and he was becoming more and more fussy every time I put him to my breast because he's like, let's just skip this and give me my bottle, where I'm actually going to get, the fast flow. So I am like, what's happening here? I don't know. My baby hates me. Like, I can't do this. I'm completely failing at breastfeeding. And I was more afraid than I've ever been afraid, more insecure, more, it just tested every single emotion of mine. I'd never felt anything as intensely as this. I spent my whole time on the couch trying to nurse him and Googling. And I was Googling everything. I was, breastfeeding, how to fix it, how do you get your baby to like you when he clearly hates you, how to do all of this stuff. And I was, obviously, Google is full of terrible information. And I just kept sifting. I got involved in these Facebook groups, these breastfeeding Facebook groups, and I'm asking people what's going on, and people are, they're helping me sift through this information and giving me this more reliable information. And so I start to learn about, very quickly, I started to learn about, the relationship between formula companies and hospitals and, these booby traps, as we call them. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a conspiracy. This is incredible. so I'm like, okay, I'm going to just start weaning him off of formula and bring him back fully to my breast. And I started to learn that I'm not making now. My supply is not coming because I'm feeding him formula. And I called the La Leche League and I talked to this. I'm still friends with her. She said, yeah, I think it's okay. Everything's okay. You just, because I had been pumping at this point too to try to bring in more milk. And she said, just keep pumping and then, try to take, say, half an ounce or something each day, just kind of titrating down on the formula. And then you can fill in the formula with the breast milk. And then eventually you won't be using the bottle. And she just kind of was like, very like calm and like, yeah, this will, it'll be fine. You just keep doing that. And I did. And a few weeks later, the bottles were all in the closet and he was just exclusively breastfeeding. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is so incredibly amazing. I'm so awesome. It was the most empowering thing ever that had ever happened to me. And
do you remember how old he was at that point?
Yeah, he was about 3 months.
So you had really been working very hard at pumping and bottle feeding and formula feeding and breastfeeding.
Yes.
And then about a couple of weeks after making this change is when you were able to exclusively breastfeed?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I think it was a few weeks after just being told, talking to a person who knew. I had some problems with Exley, my second son, but this time I knew a lactation consultant. I called her. I said, hey, what's with these green poops too long? The green poops are going on too long. She said, okay, well, just do this and this and this. And then it was like resolved within a week. And, I think that was the difference, is that I connected with somebody who knew what they were talking about, having a community of people.
So where do you think the gap was with your first baby with regards to, you said you read What to Expect When Expecting.
Yes.
Did you take any breastfeeding classes? Did you talk to your baby's pediatrician about having difficulties with breastfeeding? Was getting help from a lactation consultant ever suggested? So where was the gap for you? Because the second time around, you're now connected and it's easier to reach out for help. But where do you think it was lacking the first time around?
Well, I think it's that the first time around, it was the whole cultural gap of just breastfeeding being, there's just a complete lack of breastfeeding information and a lack of breastfeeding anywhere. I mean, nobody sees it. Nobody's, I just never seen it before. So I read this book and it said, breastfeeding can be really hard. So, just say no to bottles and pacifiers and, everything will be fine. And I was like, okay, so that sounds easy. I don't know why they're saying it's so hard. It sounds fine. And so then the really big gap, I would say, is these medical professionals coming into my room when my baby was a day old, telling me that he was starving and that he needed formula. That's a problem. That's a really big problem that goes beyond just breastfeeding mothers. I mean, that is a corporate, marketing evil scheme that goes on, especially in this country, where they're purposely sabotaging breastfeeding relationships from the get-go. It's very methodically thought out. And that was, that was the biggest problem. And these people themselves thought, well, yeah, that's fine. You can just do that. You can breastfeed and formula feed. No big deal. I mean, these medical professionals themselves are not thinking about this and knowledgeable in breastfeeding. And they're just, passing, they know that they're getting these incentives from formula companies. So they're pushing this product onto people and it's just normal. It's completely normal and accepted in our culture that this goes on. And so when I'm trying to breastfeed, the biggest problem is that I'm sticking a bottle of formula into his mouth and, there's a complete disconnect. So, and I also didn't know this. I didn't know that that was a problem, that was going to be hurting my supply and what I didn't know all these things that was going to be affecting my body and my.
Yeah, right. You had no idea cause and effect.
Right. So then just speaking to another human being finally, and we're so isolated. It's not like I was going out onto the street seeing breastfeeding mothers and talking to other breastfeeding mothers. Nobody's breastfeeding on the street. I mean, maybe, you see it once in a while, maybe, but it's not like you're walking around and this is what moms are doing. You go to the park and moms are feeding their babies with bottles, which that's the norm in our culture.
So in your life at that point, if your mother was around, was she able to be helpful in any way? Did you have any friends who had babies who were
No,
breastfeeding?
no, I had no friends that were parents. I worked in social work. There's very few parents in social work. Nobody, there's not a lot of people who are raising children when they're working in that type of environment. So there were a couple usually when they did have babies, they did what I did. They just didn't come back to work. So when I had a baby, I was the first one of my friends to have a baby. I was completely isolated. I didn't know that I was supposed to have people around me to help with that. I mean, I'd always done things on my own, and I didn't know that that was helpful. So when I got connected, that's what, Facebook is just, people complain about Facebook all the time, but it really is, I mean, it's really helping a lot of mothers connect with people and getting, good information. And talking with, when I started going to the La Leche League meetings, she was very helpful with, there were other breastfeeding moms there. They're all sitting there breastfeeding. I'm like, oh, wow, this is all.
All of a sudden, you're in a room with other people who are breastfeeding.
Right. And this woman is like, she's like, oh, yeah, you can help him get a better latch and just do this. And, she was just like matter of factly telling me these things that were like complete game changers to me. They were.
When you went to La Leche League meetings, was there any older babies that at that point in your mothering that they were nursing and you were freaking out seeing it?
No, at that point, I was so freaked out by my own breastfeeding relationship. I was just like, oh my God, because I thought to myself, well, maybe I'll breastfeed for 6 months. And then, I didn't have any plan. I'm like, I'll breastfeed for 6 months and then I'll give him formula. Like I had no plans. I couldn't see, 1 foot in front of me.
Yeah, I asked because when I went to one of my first La Leche League moments, I was also like you. I didn't really have any particular plans and I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
But I do remember that when I saw a child of maybe 2 or 3 kind of walk up to his mommy, sit on his lap and kind of, tug at her shirt, I remember thinking, I don't know, that's kind of weird. I don't know if I'll be doing that then. I mean, I wasn't extremely judgmental, but I did have, no, that's kind of weird. And when I think about it now, to me, that's very, very normal for me.
Yeah.
But I remember that was first thinking, and I was struggling with breastfeeding too, but I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. So I think it's always interesting as a lactation consultant and the work that you do, it's helpful for us to remember some of the thoughts and feelings that we had initially, because we get what other people might think is so radical about it all, that it is helpful for us to remember what our thoughts and feelings were like when we were first new at it, and we really didn't see any other women breastfeed, and it was all new and different, because it helps us to get into the mindset and remember what that new mother is thinking and feeling, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, if somebody told me that I would be 4.5 years later still breastfeeding him, I would have been like, no, why would I do that? That's weird.
Right. Why would I do that?
Yeah, like a 4-year-old breastfeeding, that is weird. I would have said that's weird. This is how disconnected I was from children at this point in my life. If I saw a 2-year-old walk up to the mom and start nursing, I probably wouldn't even known how old the child was. I would be like, I don't know, is that like a 1-year-old?
That 6-year-old is
I don't
coming
know.
up.
I have no idea. Like, I didn't know, I had nothing. Now you can say like, oh, well, that baby's about to, I had no idea. I'm like, I don't know. Is that like 8-month-old baby? I don't know.
Exactly. I know. And it's funny because a lot of people are like that before you have a kid. Now, of course, we're like, 3 or 4 months,
Right.
8 or 9 months,
exactly
12 months.
They are. If I had seen somebody nursing their 4-year-old, I've been like, oh, that's a little weird. But I still don't even think I would have had like enough thought to think of.
You were just so in your own heads.
Taking a little break to let you know about the new Mother Survival Guide, Practical Tips for the 4th Trimester. I wrote this book in response to all the moms that I have worked with who express just how difficult postpartum life can really be. It takes many of us by shock, and a lot of us say, I really wish I would have known more how to prepare for this stage. Well, the new Mother Survival Guide, Practical Tips for the 4th Trimester, does just that. It is filled with lots of great tips on preparing and getting yourself organized for the first 12 weeks at home with a new baby. I've taken what many of us experienced moms have learned along the way and put it into a book that is easy to read and focused just on this subject. There's no need to wade through tons of other new parenting information just to get the goods on surviving those first 12 weeks. This book is like one big cheat sheet that I wished I had when I was pregnant the first time. I know I sure could have used help organizing myself during pregnancy so that my postpartum time would have been much smoother. I didn't know what I didn't know. Between my personal experiences and all the years as a childbirth educator and also my work as a birth and a postpartum doula, I've realized that many parents just have not put much thought into how they were going to handle, let's say, all of the chores that still need to be done in their everyday life after they've had a baby. There's the shopping and cooking and cleaning. There's inside cleaning and outside yard work. Pets still need to be cared for, walked, bills still need to be paid. And I find that many people, they're counting on them feeling pretty good and their significant other being able to really help them out a lot with all of these chores. But you know what? There's no backup plan frequently for, like, what if you give birth early and the people you planned, your mom, grandmom, aunt, sister, your helpers can't get here to help you with what you planned on them doing, perhaps for a few weeks. There's no backup plan to help your exhausted significant other who's trying to do everything and also lacking sleep. You've not prepared for the baby coming early, for possibly needing to spend time in the NICU, a possible cesarean section for you, or perhaps for your partner to get sick right after you had your baby. This is all real life stuff that happens more frequently than you will know. The New Mother Survival Guide helps you put a plan in place, and it covers all of these scenarios and much more. To get your book, just go to www.allaboutmothering.com/fourth, FOURTH, dash trimester, TRIMESTER, dash ebook. That is allaboutmothering.com/fourth dash trimester dash ebook. I really hope that you enjoy the show today. Let's get back to the show with our guest, Abby Theuring.
I would like to know, because of course with everything that you're saying, it wasn't going well, you were tenacious, you were fighting for the breastfeeding, and we can fight for the breastfeeding, we really, really want to do it, but we're also overwhelmed and exhausted and sleep deprived in the early days. So I'm wondering if there was a time that you had when you thought, I just cannot do this anymore. Now we know you carried on anyway, but was there a time or two where you really felt like that, and what turned the corner for you?
I don't know why this was happening, but my most frequent thoughts were panic based. I was in a panic that I was losing this breastfeeding relationship. I didn't come across the like, oh, I just can't deal with this anymore, I don't want to do it anymore thought. Mine turned to just panic, like, oh my God, like I'm losing something. And like, oh my God, what if I lose this? What if I lose this? And I don't know why I'm a very anxious person. I'm extremely anxious. So I think my go-to thought process at that point just went to just all anxiety-based thoughts of, oh my God, I'm going to lose this, or what if, and I remember even talking to my husband, like, so if I don't make milk anymore and I just don't, and and my milk just dries up and he doesn't get any milk anymore, maybe I could just comfort nurse him. Maybe he can just be formula fed, and then I can just be, like a pacifier. Like he could just still comfort nurse. Like I was just so panicked that he was not going to be nursing from me anymore. And I don't know what that was, but I think it was just my general anxiety issues.
Do you remember when you say you were going to lose the nursing relationship, every woman is different in her thinking, and some have a whole list of 10 reasons, and some have just one reason. So are you connected with what your thoughts and feelings were at that point? Were you afraid to lose this cuddling, snuggling relationship? Were you afraid to lose, I am not going to be able to provide my milk for him, and that's the healthiest food that I want him to have? Were you afraid of that it was going to change the way how you mothered your baby? Were you afraid of maybe things that you had learned at that point about eye development and brain IQ
No, I
and
didn't know
those
any of
type of
that
things?
stuff. No, I didn't know any of that health stuff, any of the breast milk and the brain and no. It was all based on our connection, like an attachment bonding. I think for some reason, like I was the only person who could breastfeed him. And so that for some reason very quickly became in my mind, the primary way that our relationship, would build and grow. So losing that breastfeeding relationship to me kind of meant losing some attachment to him, I think.
When you finally were able to exclusively breastfeed him and you realized that you could put the bottles aside, the pumping aside, is there ever a time when you got very emotional, you sat down and just cried about it all?
Oh, I cried every day. From the beginning, I cried every single day I cried all the time. Through the bad part of it, I was crying all the time. It kind of just developed so slowly where I stopped pumping. Somebody on Facebook was like, because I was freaking out about the pumping. I'm not pumping enough milk. It's not coming out. And somebody said, hey, why don't you stop pumping? And I remember she said, why don't you just take a break from pumping? She could like maybe pick up on my anxiety about all of it. And she said, why don't you just stop pumping? And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe I should do that. Maybe I'll just stop pumping for a while. I'll try to regroup. Every time I kind of, dropping the pumping and then started to wean off the formula, it was like all of this, every time it happened, there was like another kind of brick lifted off my shoulders. Like it just started to feel lighter and it started to feel less anxiety provoking. And what I did was, I think more than sitting down and just becoming emotional about how happy I was, I just took to the streets. Like I just put him in an ergo and I just started walking everywhere. I started making friends. I started to, I was taking bus all around town and going to meetups and parks. It was just sort of this kind of freeing thing where I just went outside and started to build this new mommy world for myself.
So you had been isolated and crying and working at it for so long that it was a certain point where it sounds like you evolved. It's working, you baby in the boob, and you can now go outside and be one with the rest of the world again.
Yeah, absolutely. And not even again, but like in a completely new way. I hadn't been living in the world as a mother. I was living in the world as a non-mother and then had this baby and I was just stuck in this house in this dark. I remember thinking, when I think back on those early days, I think of a dark room, me panicking, crying, and trying to figure out why this baby won't sleep and won't breastfeed and everything just feels dark and wrong. I don't think I had postpartum depression by any means, but I do think I had, some baby blues there in the beginning. Yeah, it was just then I went out into the world and was like, hey, wait a minute, what am I doing? I'm a mom. I have this baby. I should be happy.
I can be out here in public.
Yeah,
I visited as a lactation consultant. I visit with lots of moms, and you just reminded me the other day I went to a home, and it's mom. She was living in a very small 1-bedroom apartment. All the shades were drawn. It was dark. Yeah. And she was having breastfeeding difficulties and talking about how she's not able to get out. And, I said, is it okay if I open up the blinds a little bit? And she's like, well, okay. She was playing like this video. And I said, do you think we might put on a little bit of music? And she's like, well, okay. And it was like within like 20 minutes, she was like, oh, like I kind of forgot about the world around me, that I can listen to music. And I said, well, let's put the baby in the carrier and let's walk to the mailbox together. Yeah. And so we walked to the mailbox together. And by the time we came back, then I started working with her. I started helping her with breastfeeding. She was in a different mindset. But, the point for her was well taken. You got to get up and out and be part of the world again. It's not good for you to be like this, and you deserve, and it was the whole thing also, like, well, how do I go out? How do I go to the store? What if she needs to eat? Where am I going to feed her? So, I mean, I know I needed to get her comfortable with breastfeeding first, but that the rest will come. But that's the other thing, is too many moms stay home isolated in dark places,
Well,
trying to
yeah.
figure out everything.
And I think that all goes hand in hand with the transition to motherhood. A lot of these problems are so much, well, for me, they were so much more exaggerated with my first son, because I was also going through this transition. Because I mean, I remember, I was like traumatized through this transition. I'm like, who am I? Oh my God, this baby is totally and completely dependent on me. I am totally and completely responsible for this other human being. Who in the world let me be responsible for a baby? I cannot believe they let me leave the hospital with this baby. I mean, I'm walking out going, oh my God, I don't know if they really know who they're sending this baby home with. I don't know if this is okay. Then I'm just depressed, and I feel like I can't really relate to my old friends anymore. And I'm not, they're trying to come over, and I'm like, I don't really want to. And they're like, let's come over and drink some wine and I'll talk. And I'm like, I can't even.
And you're like, ladies, you have no clue.
I'm like, I cannot wrap my brain around doing that right now. I cannot even. But then I had no mothers to kind of relate to as well. So that's like when I started to make some mother friends, I was like, oh my God, okay. So then you know what it's like to feel like connected to people. It's completely changed the game for me, finding breastfeeding moms to hang out with in a park. It was like amazing.
Right. And that's what it's like a whole new world opens up. And don't you find that that's a big part of what made it, whatever hard times you might have had with your second, everything has just made that easier, because now you have made that transition from whatever your life was like before to a mother.
Absolutely.
And now
you have to transition to a mother again. You're already a mother, so you're
already a mother. You already know a lot. So the learning curve from whatever you were doing before to becoming a mother, you're used to being called mom, thinking of yourself as a mom, right, being home with your child. So there's this huge learning curve that you don't have to go through again.
Yeah.
Right?
We always joke about how with Jack, my first, we would never open the blinds. We would never make any noise. It had to be dark. It had to be quiet all the time. Shh, the baby's sleeping. And then Exley was born, and people were coming over. We had a meal train, so people were coming over, and they're like tiptoeing in. And we're like, come on in. Come on. Like the blinds are like Exley's sleeping by like the sun in his face by the window, or like yelling, and Jack's throwing stuff. We're like, come on in. No,
I know,
it's gotta go. Should we go? And I'm like, we're not. Don't leave.
I know, it's so funny, and I think that I call it like a rite of passage that first time, that nobody can tell you that. You just unfortunately have to live through it and go through it yourself in order to really get it, because now you have your second child, and you may be used to going to meeting your friends at the park every Tuesday and Thursday. So you're schlepping your newborn who's only 3 days old with you, because you're not going to sit home now.
Yeah. Oh, I was sitting at a cafe. Exley was 8 days old. I was sitting at a cafe drinking a glass of wine with him in the Moby. I was like, yeah, what? People are like, how old is that baby? I'm like, 8 days. They're like, oh my God, good for you. I'm like, well, what else am I going to do? I can't sit at home.
Right. It's, if you take a look at Abby with Jack and Abby with Exley, it's like completely two different
right? People. Yeah.
I'd love for you to tell me, do you have any fun stories about breastfeeding that you'd like to share?
Fun stories. Well, breastfeeding toddler is like always lots of fun. I say sort of sarcastically, because it is fun, but it's also very taxing, with all of the gymnastics and all of that.
So just tell a little bit about that, because some people might not know. So you're tandem nursing?
Yeah. So, I am tandem nurse.
So just tell for the people who might not know what that is, just talk a little bit about what tandem nursing is.
Well, so tandem nursing is nursing I think it's technically 2 different aged kids, or is nursing twins considered tandem too? I don't know.
No.
Okay. So Jack, I got pregnant with my second child, and Jack was still breastfeeding, and he wasn't going to stop. I'm pretty sure Jack's never going to stop, actually. I'll say that, when I got pregnant, my milk supply went down, and he started to slow down a little bit, and I got nervous. I was like, I don't want him to, I wanted to tandem nurse. I didn't want him to wean. while I was pregnant, I was really looking forward to tandem nursing. Of course, then tandem nursing happened, and I was like, whoa, this is intense.
Why did I want to do this?
Why did I want to do this? Yeah. But it's fun. It's like, they are, and especially in the beginning, because, that was like Jack's whole language was, breastfeeding, and that's how he related to me. And so now he sees this baby breastfeeding, and there was obviously some jealousy, but also they would latch on together, and they kind of got to know each other, by breastfeeding and looking at each other. And Exley would, it was very exciting when Exley would start to poke him in the eye and, reach over, and they would like hold hands. And, it's like, there's nothing compares to, looking down at your kids, and they're both nursing, and they're both touching each other and exploring each other and getting to know each other that way. Exley's older now, so if they're both nursing, Exley will just haul off and smack him in the face, or, Jack will take his foot and try to put it up his nose, or, it's just, there's always some sort of game going on. The other day, Jack wanted something. I can't remember. He wanted me to do something, and I said, okay, well, hold on. Exley's still eating, so let's just wait until he's done. And so Jack came over and started squeezing my boob, and he said, I'm going to make it go faster so that he eats faster.
And I can do that, too. So I'd love for you to tell me anything funny or interesting that's happened with regards to nursing in public, which I know that both you and we just don't think there's any big deal. But we also know that there's a lot of people who do think it's a big deal. And now you're tandem nursing both of them. So has any kind of fun thing happened there, or a learning curve that you had to go through, or someone that you had to deal with in a way that you think was funny?
I don't tandem nurse in public a whole lot. I did probably more in the beginning when Jack was transitioning to a new sibling, and we had a really rough few months when Exley was first born. We would tandem nurse in the park sometimes just to kind of help Jack regroup and everybody just remain kind of comfortable. And it's really hard to breastfeed one like really tall toddler and then like a little tiny newborn, because it's like completely different holds. So, I mean, getting tandem nursing in public is like very hard to get comfortable. But I can't. I did it at a restaurant. I know I remember doing it at a restaurant, and I also did it at the park. And I'll say that I was a little bit nervous. I was like, oh, you certainly don't see this too often. So I was like, okay, how does this look to everybody? Do I look like an idiot? Do I look like I'm totally uncomfortable? Like, is somebody going to say something to me? I do breastfeed in public no matter where I am, but I'm not immune to, the fears that go around with it sometimes. We were at this was before Exley was born, but we were at a car dealership, and Jack was like, he was old at this point. He's like, he calls it booby. So I want booby, I want booby. And then he's just like standing in the middle of this, I want booby! And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, okay, this is a little embarrassing. I guess I shouldn't be embarrassed, but I am a little bit. So that was pretty funny. He's pretty funny. He's older now. He talks, he knows what he wants, and he has no sense of whether he's at home or out in public. He just says what he wants, and it's usually booby.
There's no filter there for a little kid. The funny thing is that I've spoken to many moms who, they realize what happened the first time around. So with their subsequent babies, they give it a different name other than booby. They might call it water, or they might call it I want to play, or something else, so that they don't have their child in the middle of a parking lot screaming, I want booby.
Shit, I didn't even think about that. Oh, man, I should have done that.
I didn't do that either. And, it's funny, and it is what it is. But I thought some mothers are just so creative in their thinking. I feel like I was just winging it every day. I wasn't so creative with that.
Well, that's a good idea, because then they're at the car dealership screaming, I want to play, or whatever, and that doesn't say, yeah. That's a great idea.
And it's like, we can't play now. We have to wait till we go home to play. So I would love to hear about your life now. So you have 2 kids, and I know you're a blogger, and you're the badass breastfeeder. So I'd love to hear about how the blogging came about, and what you're doing with your blog and website, and anything else that you'd want to talk about in the work that you do.
I stay home full time, which has turned into working from home. because the blog has turned into quite a situation. And that started actually really early on, like very shortly after all of that stuff kind of got resolved with Jack, early on breastfeeding stuff. And I started to feel, really kind of empowered and really happy and started connecting with people. I was actually getting my hair done, and my hairdresser, who I have been going to for like 10 years, I was telling her these stories about, Jack and whatever, and she's cracking up and she's like, you got to start writing this stuff down. You should write a blog. And I was like, what? I don't know. That sounds too much. That sounds like too much work. Very, very shortly after that, it was like springtime, and Jack was, I'd say, like 8 months old, and he had gotten really sick. He turned out not to be as sick as we thought he was, but his temperature was fluctuating high and low, and it was very scary. And we were in the emergency room a couple times. Doctors were nervous. It was this very, high intense, high emotion kind of situation. So they're doing these tests, and it turned out that it was not this, it was some sort of just something not serious. And so it was just, we just came home just elated. And that afternoon, or a couple days later, I was in the park and I was nursing him in the park. And I asked a friend, I said, hey, can you take a picture of me nursing him? I posted it in this mom group that I had been in. I was like talking about how happy I was and how, just how happy we were that everything was okay. It started this huge fight in this group. It just went on, like, people were like, oh, that's gross. Why would you post that picture in here? I can't believe you're doing that in public. Why wouldn't you use a cover? I had no idea there was any of this. I had no idea there was like breastfeeding politics, breastfeeding in public politics. I had no idea.
Isn't it nice when we are lovingly, blissfully, and we just have no clue?
Just so naive, yeah. So like, oh, here's just this cute picture of me and my baby, and then it started like this, like World War III on Facebook. It was just very dramatic, and I was like, wow, okay, this blog is maybe sounding a little bit better right now. And so I actually just started writing. The very first thing I wrote was the whole thing I went through with Jack. And I posted it to like my friends. There were so many people that were like, that related to it. They were like, oh my God, I can't believe you went through that. I went through that too. And the more I wrote and the more that people started reading it and following, what I learned was that all of us are, there's so many women going through this, which is, the problem. It was amazing to hear that there were so many people that related to just the tiniest things that I was saying. That's kind of how it started to grow. And then we were also getting involved or learning about attachment parenting, because then we're like, why won't he sleep? And then we're learning about, cry it out. And we're like, oh, really, that doesn't sound like that's, something we want to do. And we're learning about co-sleeping and all these things. And so we're getting involved in this attachment parenting thing too. So then I started writing about that. And then, it just kind of grew and grew. So that's what I do now. I wish I could blog more, but I'm most of the time just trying to manage these two kids. I have work hour. My husband helps out a ton. So on the days that he works from home, I get like a few hours to work just on the blog to do that.
What are your goals for the blog?
Oh, people always ask me that.
Oh,
I have like somebody who helps me with marketing, and he's like, what's your goal for the blog? And I'm like, I don't know.
I guess I was coming from a different point of view, but yeah, I can see how
I know. Yeah. It was a totally different, yeah. The funny thing is that I didn't intend to write a blog to hundreds of thousands of people. I just thought I would write it for my friends. So the fact that it kind of turned into a job was a total surprise to me.
So you're definitely winging it as you go, because you're just starting it as a vehicle to get your thoughts out.
That's what I'm always trying to convince people of. Like, you don't know, I'm totally winging this. Like, I have no grand.
There's no SBA and major business plan.
Right. I don't know what my ultimate goal is. I think I like how it is now. I like that I get to blog every once in a while, and then I can put my thoughts out there to people. I like working with a very small amount of sponsors who can kind of help, that covers expenses. And I also, the companies that I choose to work with are very focused on education. So we get to do things like educational chats, just about breastfeeding or pumping or these kinds of things. And the experts, lactation consultants will get involved and help just bringing great information to people. I would love for my blog to turn into a book. I think it would be a really fun thing to happen. Just to keep it going, just to keep my thoughts out there, to keep empowering moms to breastfeed in public. I think that's one of the things that I think women get the most of. I think that if we polled the audience, I think they would say like breastfeeding in public is the one topic that they get the most from my blog and Facebook page.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to say, because there's a lot out there that people are blogging about their breastfeeding experience, and there's a lot of pictures on Facebook now, and while it still can freak people out and we still go through these waves, it's become, I think, quite a bit more of the norm. So yeah. I was curious what you were hearing back from people. What are you feeling people are most commonly getting out of your blog, and why did they share it with others, and why did they keep coming back?
Yeah, so I think the two things I hear the most from people when I meet people and when I get feedback on the internet is feeling more comfortable breastfeeding in public, which goes hand in hand with breastfeeding longer than they ever thought they would. So there's people who are breastfeeding their toddlers. One of the common things they'll say, he's 15 months old and we're still breastfeeding. I never thought that I would breastfeed this long. And, I just love it. And so I hear that. And then the breastfeeding in public thing, which I think, if you become comfortable with breastfeeding in public, obviously maintaining a breastfeeding relationship for longer becomes easier, because then it can become a part of your everyday, wherever you go life. So yeah, those are the two things I think that people get the most out of.
That's great. So beyond maybe one day this becoming a book, I know you also, you've spoken at some conferences and expos, right? It's probably stressful, but also a lot of fun. You get out and meet a lot of new people.
Yes, I do. I do love that. I do love speaking. The traveling is tough. It's really tough traveling around when there's, little kids involved. It's definitely, that's one of the things that I enjoy as well.
Is there any other message or anything else that you wanted to talk about before we end?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I'm thrilled that you were able to. I know having two young kids, it's hard. So, and it's a Saturday that we're taping. So I'm sure you have help from your husband or someone else who's watching the kiddos while you've been spending time with me here. So, and I know your time is precious. So I really, really do appreciate. I'd love meeting you, and I've enjoyed reading your blog. I really want to tell people to go check out your blog. It's filled with a lot of things in addition to breastfeeding. I was telling Abby that I was enamored reading your home birth story on your blog. So there's lots of really good stuff there. So I think everybody who's listening to the show should check it out and share some of the stories. And I really, really appreciate your time spending here with us, telling us a little bit about your life.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here.
Okay. And that's it for our show today. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I hope you're enjoying the shows. iTunes makes it so easy for you to get all the previous and upcoming shows. Just go to iTunes and search for All About Breastfeeding and subscribe to the show. As promised, I am now offering several ways that we can connect with each other. I talk to mothers all the time after they have given birth. Many have said they would have liked the opportunity to talk with me before their baby was born so they could go over certain things that may have been troubling them about breastfeeding. You have many questions about your own health, medication you're taking, and how it might impact breastfeeding, or perhaps about your breast and nipple anatomy. Perhaps you have fears or anxieties about breastfeeding, and you feel it will be helpful to talk it out before your baby's born. Some mothers just have a bunch of questions that could not be answered in your regular breastfeeding class because of time or privacy. These are just some of the many reasons you will want to have a Skype consult with me. Talking things through can help you clear the way emotionally for an excellent start with breastfeeding. All you need to do is go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/Skype to schedule your online prenatal consult. Next up to talk about, I finally have all the pieces in place, and our online breastfeeding mothers group is ready to go. I know how hard it can be in the last trimester, just waiting to give birth, looking forward to holding your baby in your arms for the first time, and the excitement building as you look forward to breastfeeding your baby. How great would it be for you to hang out with other pregnant moms and new mothers? Pregnant moms get to find out what new motherhood is like and what newborn breastfeeding is like from brand new moms. And the brand new moms get to talk about all your breastfeeding stuff and ask all your questions about normal newborn breastfeeding. What I have is a virtual online breastfeeding mothers group where you sign on once a week to meet and chat with other mothers who are going through similar experiences as you are. You become friends and support each other. I will be facilitating the group, so you know there's always an experienced lactation consultant ready to jump in and answer your questions and make sure the information is accurate. If you would like to be part of 10 mothers who will meet once a week virtually for 8 weeks to talk about all about your breastfeeding stuff, just check out allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/support. You will find out more detailed information on the group's start dates and prices and how it all works. I really am excited and I look forward to meeting with you on Google Hangout and getting to know each other.